Dylan has to get home to a football game. It's sad Dallas Cowboys. We haven't turned it on. Ready to go. Sorry, Dylan. Against the Giants. Well, welcome to the September 26th Finance Committee. And the first order of business is called order and approval of the next agenda. Moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Fay. Any discussion about the agenda? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Approval of the minutes for August 29th. Ms. Kerr makes the motion, seconded by Mr. Denisha. Any discussion or changes to be made to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. For our first resolutions, we have Christine Don Chambers, our highway superintendent. First resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a service agreement with Train US Inc. for heating, venting, and air conditioning HVAC services for the Department of Highways. Moved by Mr. Denisha, second by Mr. Smithers and Ms. Kerr. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. This resolution authorizes us to enter into an agreement with Train. His service is procured through Omnia, which is a procurement system that the county subscribes to. Also, this company is used by buildings and grounds for the maintenance of the system.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Chambers? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Our next resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for the Department of Highways for increased fuel, repair, and overtime expenses. Moved by Ms. Curran, seconded by Mr. Smithers. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, this resolution that modifies the highway department budget, but basically by moving funds within the existing budget. For example, the first line decreases the in the maintenance lines $80,000. That's with unfilled positions that we had over the season and funds the overtime. The increase in scrap steel sales will cover the electricity and natural gas increases. And the road machinery rental that's internal charges that we have for our equipment. The second line of decreases will fund the rest of the increases in appropriations in that first row. So we're doing more capital projects. So just a shift of where we are putting the rental. In light of the 10 additional miles that we added to the list, that was not original budget. And the technical, again, decrease in the shop, the HR, decrease in appropriations funds the overtime in the shop. And the increase in appropriations comes from in the HD as repairs to other departments, equipment and vehicles, which is largely the solid waste in the sheriff's department.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Chambers? We were able to exchange the solid waste. Is that not?
We with the repairs, the
Okay.
shop can do the repairs.
Okay.
And this is in the HD for the shop.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Any questions for Mr. Chambers? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Next resolution is approving a change order with Lawman Heating and Cooling for the construction of fuel island stations at the Lisbon, Russell, and Potsdam Highway Outpost facilities. Moved by Mr. Forsythe, second by Mr. Smithers. Mr.
Yes.
Chambers.
Thank you. The legislature approved the installation of fuel stations at the various the 3 outposts listed. And we need to have the sub bays and concrete put under these tanks. We went to diesel and gasoline that will be on our fob system, so it'll all be electronically charged, and other departments will be able to fuel at these locations. This work is necessary to install the tanks and is within the existing budgets for the.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Chambers? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
The next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a supplemental agreement with Brooks Washboard and Architect for the additional services for the Potsdam Outpost facility and modifying the 2022 budget for the Department of Highways. Moved by Mr. Lightfoot, second by Ms. Curran. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, this is, as you just stated, an agreement with Washburn Architects for the Outpost. Due to doing the Potsdam facilities out of sequence, this is requiring additional and a new contractor. You have all the submittals and increased construction time, so the clerk of the works is needed for a longer period of time. This will take us to completion project.
Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Then we move on to solid waste, also with Mr. Chambers, and the first resolution and the only resolution for solid waste is authorizing the chair to award and sign a contract with Waste Management for processing recycled materials from the Augsburg Recycling Transfer Facility. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Ms. Fiano.
Yes, thank you. As the board is aware, we are constructing a new recycling transfer station at the Lisbon/Ogdensburg site, approved by resolution 294 of this year. We only had one bidder, Waste Management, and this is where our recyclables are currently going after they leave Development Authority of the North Country. At $115 a ton, and there is sharing of commodity value. And if we had been doing this contract since the beginning of the year, the average value to date would have been $90.95 for the recyclables through last month, which would be a net cost of $24.05 per ton for processing our recyclables.
Mr. Smithers.
Don, is this the facility down in Syracuse?
Yes, it's in Liverpool. That's
Okay.
correct. The actual corporate location where the contract's held is not at Seneca area, but the facility is in Liverpool.
Okay, Mr. Forsythe.
Don, and the county board meeting is, I heard that glass, is there a new market for glass locally somewhere recyclable?
Not that I'm aware of, but we did use a recycled glass for an abutment for the bridges, the things that we just replaced today. It's a foam glass, but they need to get the glass crushed and then make it into a lovely aggregate.
Okay.
That's
I'll look
a
into it
developing
a little
one in-
more. I heard it just last week or whatever.
Right, that's in Burlington, Vermont,
Okay.
so it's
Yeah,
different direction.
yeah. The other thing is, how many additional employees are we gonna need to man the recycle?
We have hired one already by eliminating some of our temporary positions, 2 temporary positions that we could not fill, and then one additional on top of that would be or is in the proposal.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Denisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don, just for clarification, Waste Management, let's say a multinational company.
Yes, sir. It is.
Any other questions for Mr. Chambers on this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. We'll move on to real property with Bruce Green. And the first resolution is authorizing the collection of omitted taxes. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Perkins. Mr. Green.
Evening. This first resolution is a annual resolution that we put forth each year for collecting omitted taxes. Omitted taxes are the tax where a person sells a property, the next person comes into that property that's not entitled to that exemption. The assessor can then charge an omitted tax. In this case, it allows us the county to collect it.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Green on this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our next resolution for Mr. Green is adopting the equalization rates for the 2023 county taxes. Moved by Mr. Forsyth, second by Ms. Curran and Mr. Perkins. Mr. Green.
Next resolution is also an annual resolution, accepting the equalization rates as we go forward. See from the list there, last year there were 12 100% heat rates, and this year we're down to 1, and that's the county fine. That just simply means that the assessed values in the county continue to, in a sense, linger, where market values are selling higher than assessments. So we expect that at this point there are 3 revals that are going to be taking place for next year. The city of Ogdensburg is doing one on their own through a contractor, and it's the towns of Oyster and also Louisville.
Mr. Smithers has a question or comment.
Just for clarification, on the second page, where you have all of the towns in the city listed, down at the bottom in the second little paragraph, where it explains that, could you elaborate a little more, explain a little further on that? A municipality will be apportioned a larger share of its tax levy. Its full value increases by a larger percentage than others. Like within a school district where you have multiple towns and one goes up significantly more than another, then their school taxes will be increased by a larger proportion.
Just means that the equalization rate is done really to apportion taxes between school districts and municipalities. It just shows that it allows the tax rate to be created that is fair between a parcel that's in one school district versus a neighboring school district. So that's the effect of the equalization rate, what it does.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at specifically, for example, the town of Fowler, the town of Governor. You have a percent change in the town of Fowler of 24.21, town of Governor is 8.14. So a homeowner like myself living on the border of town of Fowler, my neighbor will see his school taxes go up a lot more than we will in the town of Governor. Is that the case?
That's right. The change between in town of Fowler from last year, from 2021 to 2022, shows that it went down 24%. Okay, so that's the change in heat rate between 1 year and the next. Governor in this case only went down 8%. So the values within Fowler will actually, for heat rates and for tax rates will actually increase more in Fowler than Governor.
Mr. Forsyth.
Well, you mentioned this because I was paying my tax bills today. I noticed that a place in Morristown is assessed a little bit less, but I believe the school tax rate was $14. And in Lisbon, I believe it was almost 24. And I'm looking at the equalization rate, 94, I think, 93, opposed to 70. So that would take into effect the majority of that.
That's right. The difference right there affects the tax rate at the end.
And
Mr. Reagan.
And my understanding that some of these towns that have chosen not to do a reval in many years and have these seemingly low percentages in order to make the system more fair. That's where the equalization rate comes in, to ensure that the town that chooses not to do a reval for many years still can pay somewhat its own share.
Anyone else? A good example, like Madrid, Washington consists of towns of Arlington, Madrid, Louisville, Lisbon. There's a variety. So if Madrid's at 100% assessment and say, for example, wishful thinking was that they were $11 per thousand. And say Lisbon was at 50%, their cost per thousand would be $22. So that's for the equalization rate. It's hard for people to grasp. But Mr. Forsyth.
Bruce, I think you remember the last time Lisbon tried to do it. And that was probably the most vicious meeting I ever saw at the town hall in my life, so it's not a popular thing that ring bells. But, I guess sooner or later it has to be.
So it has to be done at some point. For Fowler's at 2%, right? Or are they? Or 9.5. It used to be at 2. So. Okay, any other questions on this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Green. We'll move on to our county attorney, Steve Button. The first resolution is authorizing the forgiveness of interest, penalties, and certain fees on property known as the Oswegatchie River Cranberry Reservoir Regulating District, located at 50 Riverside Drive in the town of Clifton. Moved by Mr. Denisha, second by Ms. Curran.
Thank you. The first resolution I presented for you this evening is a request by the ORCRRD. The ORCRRD originally leased in 2004 an area that was down actually in the town of Clifton to Trafalgar Power. Power was supposed to generate power at that mine, secure a FERC license. They did so until just shy of 2015 when they filed for bankruptcy. After they emerged from bankruptcy, the landowner, ORCRRD, ended up leasing to Ampersand Power. Ampersand Power also wound up in default on the same piece of property. During the course of the transition back to ORCRRD, there was a missed transition of the taxation associated with the 2020 taxes. ORCRRD has paid the 21s, paid the 22s. They are looking to pay the 2020 taxes also, but they have requested the board consider forgiving the interest and fees because they were actually assessed against Ampersand while Ampersand was holding on to the lease premise.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Button? Mr. Smithers?
About the taxes in the years before 2020. In the years between declaring bankruptcy of one and then the other, were the taxes paid on those years?
So during the Trafalgar years, we had to end up filing a bankruptcy claim. Those are the first years after they filed for bankruptcy, we had to file a claim for the unpaid tax. Once they emerged from bankruptcy and was transferred to Ampersand, Ampersand did pay on the taxes during the period. 2020 was the year that they defaulted. They defaulted actually several years. But during the transition back to ORCRRD, that 2020 period was missed. So this 2020 is the only year in question. All years prior have been taken care of, all years post have been taken care of.
Mr. Forsyth?
Does this create the sort of towards other properties that may come along, sort of problem?
If you're concerned about it establishing precedent, no, I don't believe that it does. A, this is discretionary to the board. B, there are extenuating circumstances associated with the reacclimation of property by ORCRRD from Ampersand that I think would make this a unique circumstance that is not technically capable of replication elsewhere. I don't want to say it's impossible for it to be replicated, but it's highly unlikely. The combination of bankruptcy filings and the difficulty of reorganization was what really led to 2020 sort of falling into a limbo.
Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve, how much are the penalties, interest, and fees?
I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. What was relayed to me was around $2,000. They would end up paying about $5,300 something in base. $5,397.
I asked, Mr. Buckman and Tree Committee if the ORCRRD had received compensation during this period. Apparently it was quite limited.
It's actually my understanding they received nothing during the year. That's the 2015 to 2020. That was part of the reason why they declared default.
Any other questions, for Mr. Button? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay. Our next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign an amended contract with Odin Environmental LLC for phase 2 of the environmental investigations of property owned by the estate of Lawrence Churchill and Andy Maslin and Donna Maslin. Moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Ms. Curran and Mr. Denisha. Mr. Button.
Thank you. I know the board is aware that during the course of the last 7 years, we've been really aggressive in trying to target environmentally contaminated properties. This year is shaping up to be our most aggressive year. So far, with 12 that are active and 3 more that are probably coming down your way in either October or November. The 2 you have in front of you were 2 that you authorized limited exploration on previously with a contract with Odin. When they went out and did the ground penetrating radar, they came back with 2 anomalies. On one of them, they actually struck the tank in the ground. So we know there are tanks there. We know that they're required to be removed. The problem that we now face is having discovered the anomalies, whether or not there are any plumes or petroleum-based spill at the 2 tanks. So this resolution would authorize an extension and expansion of the exploration of those 2 properties through Odin, who we already have a contract with.
Questions for Mr. Button or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our next resolution is transferring an easement to National Grid for the benefit of Dylan Smith and Cherie Smith over a portion of reforestation land owned and maintained by St. Lawrence County. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Forsythe. Mr. Button.
Thank you. The resolution you have in front of you is really pro forma. There is a new construction that is going up next to a piece of county reforestation. The current existing power lines require that National Grid acquire an easement to be able to run power to that new home construction. The new home construction is requesting really a limited cross over a corner of that reforestation land. And when I say a limited cross, we're only talking about roughly 20 yards in on that reforestation lot for the National Grid line to cross to access the Smith's property for their construction. I did check the soil and water, as it's really their responsibility to maintain on reforestation lots. They indicated that they had no objections to granting limited use of running power.
The line is in the air.
Line is in the air.
Line is in the air. Any questions for Mr. Button? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. The next resolution is transferring funds from the 2019 tax foreclosure sale to the environmental remediation reserve account. Moved by Mr. Smithers, second by Mr. Forsythe and Ms. Curran.
Thank you. The first thing that I'll point out is that that indicates that we're transferring money from the 2019 tax foreclosure. 2019 tax foreclosure sale actually occurred in 2021. Based on our cycle, we're essentially a couple of years behind. So this year in 2022, we actually handled the 2020 taxes and foreclosure on the 2020 taxes. But the transfer here would be to enable us to complete not only the 2 Odin properties we just talked about, but as I indicated, I anticipate 3 more headed your way sometime in the next 30 to 60 days.
Okay, questions for Mr. Button? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for the county attorney's office for the self-insurance fund due to increased cost and scheduled loss of use of funds. Moved by Mr. Forsythe, second by Mr. Sheridan and Ms. Curran. Mr. Button.
Thank you. I apologize in advance, but this is a little more of a complicated explanation that we would like to give. I know everybody would like to especially Mr. Sober. But I will do my best to consolidate this very quickly so that we can wrap our hands around it. The resolution you have in front of you would transfer $500,000 from our reserve account associated with our self-insurance fund to our benefits and awards fund. And I'll explain. During the course of the past year, we've actually seen not only an increase in scheduled loss of use awards, but we've seen an increase in both our medical spend and in our expense spend. Our expense spend and our medical spend has seen roughly a 6 to 10% increase collectively associated with operation. We largely attribute that to inflation. But one thing that is impacted during the course of administration of the workers' comp plan, when you see a downturn in the economy, is that you will see an increase in the number of scheduled loss of use award. And I'll explain what scheduled loss of use award is, so that you can follow me around the room on this. When an individual gets injured under a workers' compensation injury, at the conclusion of a year after surgery, they will go back to their doctor, and their doctor can see if there is, in fact, permanent loss of use of that body part. If there is permanent loss of use of that body part, they will assign a permanency rating. That permanency rating equates to a number of weeks under the schedules that amount to a schedule loss of use. Those weeks are payable at the numbers of the average weekly wage of the injured employee. Now, when an employee continues to remain employed with its employer, they don't have the ability under the workers' compensation law to settle their case outright. They are barred under the law from doing so. But they can go and claim a scheduled loss of use, which acts as an advance against any future settlement on their claim. So essentially, they're going to the workers' comp bank to make an advance against a future settlement that will be paid. What this does is reduces our long-term tail associated with these claims. So if you'll recall, a month and a half ago, I came before you and I said, we've actually seen a success story associated with the targeted settlements that reduced the long-term claims from roughly $40 million down to about $3 million. We also saw an increase in our reserve funds go up. We also saw a decrease in our annual apportionment from 4.4 million per year to 3.2 million per year. Well, when you see this 500,000 come out of the reserve, go into the apportionment, it reduces your tail of that 23 million that you're seeing, because you've essentially taken advance, or they've taken an advance against those future claims on that specific injury. So we've seen an increase in the number of, so to speak, draws against the workers' compensation bank for scheduled loss of use payments this year. They know they can't settle, but they can at least get advance on that settlement through these scheduled losses of use.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Button? Do you have your hand up, Rita? Okay. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next up, our treasurer, Renee Cole. And the first resolution is modifying the 2022 budget of the treasurer's office for taxes on county reforestation properties. Moved by Mr. Burke, second by Mr. Oh. I think it's up.
Used to sitting, sorry. The first resolution, this is to modify our budget for taxes that we pay on county reforestation properties. I don't know if any of you recall, last year I came in, I think about a month in October, because we had received our school tax bills and we were budget last year due to a revaluation that was done in the town of Fraser. Unfortunately, when I discovered that last year, we had already established this year's budget. So this year's budget is based on an under budget actually last year. So this will cover us, and hopefully we're on track for the taxes for next year.
Any questions for Mrs. Cole? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. The next resolution is amending resolution number 22-2022 for bank depositories and investment of county funds. Moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Kern.
So typically I bring this resolution in January as part of the rework meeting, but I need to make a couple of changes to the current investment resolution. There's just a couple of small changes. I adjusted the maximum amounts that are listed on the front page there in bold. Key Bank, I increased to 75 million. It was set at 65. That was largely because we had a different mix and we were carrying more money and earlier this year when I established these amounts in January. But as some of you may have noticed, the markets have changed. We have some better opportunities, and right now we're using treasuries to keep capital. So that increase will allow us to keep what we need invested there and earn a better income. I also increased the New York class. That was set at 30 million, and for the same reason, we're carrying more money there now, so I increased that to $50 million. That's partial, so we're splitting things between treasuries and New York class. Treasuries are 30-16 year investment, but the funds that we're keeping at class are more liquid, we have access to. So we keep that for covering payroll, but we keep it invested because it's earning about, I think today I checked, it was about 2.4%, which is amazing. Last year, community bank, we were keeping things in money markets, it was the very best rates. And we could get, it was a 0.35. So things are looking up on that side. I don't know if it's enough to keep up with costs, but we're doing what we can to help. The next change was the biggest change. I've actually added another depository in there as Nyu Trust. This is a brand new, it's a new local government investment pool. It's very similar to New York class, which we set up in end of 2019 is when we approved that. Nyu Trust offers the Excelsior Fund, that is strictly for New York State counties. It's for short-term fixed income investments. It follows all of the same New York general municipal law rules, provides us the ability to invest operating cash for short-term durations. It's just another alternative for us to New York class. And right now, because class have been purchasing their portfolio in a rising market, we might have a chance to actually get in and earn another 0.5% with Unity Trust if we get them set up. Gail has to write out for class. Otherwise, I think we're going to be very, very close to the same. But this way here, it's there. If we need it or if it offers a better rate for us, they've been endorsed also by contract.
Any questions for our treasurer? Renee, could you tell us, obviously we don't have this many million, I don't want people to be honest, I think we have this many million in all these accounts. Could you tell us about approximately how much money that you have in reserve that you have invested? $5 or $6 million.
Yeah, I have some. So we've mostly removed most of our funds from the money market. At the end of August in New York class, we were carrying about $15 million of its all funds.
Okay.
So it could be county road if they have anything, although this is the time of year when they're actually short funds. But the ARPA money is also included in these as well. The workers' comp fund is included. They have separate pools. We track them separately. It's not illegal. We'll never do that in this office. Treasury bills at the, we had, I printed this on the 22nd, and the bills, the total that we had out in T-bills at that time was 53 million.
So it's money that we have obligations for, but in the meantime, we can utilize that to earn interest.
Yeah, a lot of the T-bills actually matured on the 22nd, and that was another reason I was hoping to set up the new investment opportunity, because we have a little bit, actually, right now they're in class, but 0.35, we'll probably move some to the new.
Can you tell us what you earned on an annual basis last year for interest?
Last year was very poor. I don't know that I have that off the top of my head. I can tell you with the treasuries that we had outstanding on the 22nd of September, they dated from purchase dates that we purchased in March of this year, March through June, that 53 million. When they all mature, some of them are 12 months. The earnings on that $614,000. And we've actually rolled some of them into new treasuries and they're earning better.
Well, 614,000 is a 1.5% tax increase.
That's just the
Good job.
treasuries, and night class is paying very well too. And if I,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any other questions on this.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We'll vote on the resolution. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carried.
Just to give you an auction update, our foreclosure auction closed Saturday. Some statistics on it, the number of parcels this year was 86. We're down some, part of that is it's largely because of two factors, COVID and turnover and our title searcher role. We have two title searchers on staff. Well, sometimes in my office, we had a retirement in 18 and we've had a couple of people in that role and training for that. So it's not too bad, but we've had fewer parcels the last couple of years. We're hoping we're on the right track with that, getting that remedy, but we had 86 parcels. Registered bidders, we had 288 this year. The total parcels was with bids for all of them, all 86 received bids. The total bids on the parcels were 1,506,000 change. On the flip side of that, the total taxes on the parcels, and this includes the environmental costs. Every year we tweak how we're accounting, keeping track of this, and this, we add some things into our calculations here. We actually, because there were quite a few larger environmental properties in this year's auctions, we wanted to make sure we took our costs along with their taxes. So the taxes were 1,165,000. We have an estimate of 45,000 for straggling water and sewer fees we'll have to pay on these parcels. And we believe the total for that we'll have to pay the oil spill fund on these is 37,950. So we'll still have a net gain. This is the best case. This is before there's anyone that may walk away from a parcel. $268,940. So that's a little bit less than last year's, but I mentioned the environmental properties that we have this year in particular. Out of that total 1.1 million in taxes, the environmental total is 372,000 or 31, almost 32% of the outstanding taxes. We just with, I think, six entities. So that's really taking the lion's share of them, which is another reason I'm happy to see that we're keeping the NRS flush with cash. Some of these taxes on these properties, one parcel, they go back to 2007, 2004, 2008, 2009, and two of them were 2012. So the county's been making everybody whole on these parcels.
Since 2004.
Right.
Mr. Forsyth has a comment.
Renee, I tried to pull it up today. Can you still pull it up to see what they all close out at? Because I didn't see the able to find an auction.
I'm not sure if after it's live auction, if it moves to different place.
Yeah, that's why I looked all around there.
Okay.
I'm just curious.
I know that we have access to them historically. I don't know if it's available.
I think, Dave, if you Google it and put in the date and the actual auction, it would be safe. I've looked at equipment in the past on there, but this may be
Yeah,
different.
because everything looked like.
Right. Okay. Oh, Mr. Perkins has a comment.
Thank you. Renee, when you said total taxes, is that just the base tax or does that include the penalties, interest and fees? That would be applied to any of them?
I'm trying to think, it's on the spreadsheet.
Okay, if you can just send that sometime, let me know.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Forsyth.
Right, on the state parcels earlier, when the state comes in and buys up land masses in San Luis County, don't they pay a tax of some sort? Property tax? Or is it,
We bill the state for their land. Yes, those parcels are county owned parcels for that resolution that we do every year.
what they do, the state does pay a tax rate?
Yes.
Is it,
Vicky in my office does the billing on it,
okay,
so.
is it similar to what a landowner would pay, or is it just like a pilot, or?
This one,
Yeah, actually, the state of New York is really quite a large property
Okay.
taxpayer.
Because in the city, I don't know if we've all seen it, but the city is talking about all the state-owned property within the city boundaries, compromise almost 30% of the tax. And the goal is to see if they can get the state to reimburse them somewhat, so maybe it is possible, I don't know. But hopefully.
Pretty substantial.
Yeah.
Anything else on the auction? The only other things I just wanted to mention, I sent out the September sales tax this afternoon. I emailed that to you, and the July bank reconciliation.
Thank you for that. Oh, yeah, more.
I'm the only vacancy. Come over there.
That would be out of order.
That's-
Making you stay. You're jealous.
that's-
You don't mind.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to the county clerk, that's Sandy Santamore. And that resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for the county clerk's office for the purchase of equipment related to the turnkey management solution system.
Last week I spoke to you.
Yeah, moved by Mr. Burke, second by Mr. Forsyth. Sorry.
Last week I spoke to you about renewing our contract with IQS, who is the vendor of our computer system. And so this week it's just modifying the budget to transfer that money from contingency to buy the equipment for it. I went to IT with the idea of the equipment this year for our 5-year contract versus purchasing it through IQS, paying a lot more money. So IT did a lot of work on that. So we're figuring about $32,000 annual savings. So over the 5-year contract, it's over $162,000.
Mr. Smithers.
This resolution where it says now therefore be it resolved seems awkward after that, and I'm not really sure what you're saying. It says that the Board of Legislators authorizes the treasurer is authorized to modify. We need to reword that.
We're looking here. All right. So I think what Mrs. Doyle says, if we could remove is authorized, that would clean it up. Okay, so that would be just a friendly change. Any questions concerning the resolution with those changes? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Nice work, Sandy, in finding savings. Social services up next. We have Mr. Joe Seaver. The resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program known as ERAP to the Department of Social Services. Moved by Mr. Burke, second by Mr. Forsyth. Ms. Curran.
Good afternoon, everybody. So this is kind of a housekeeping kind of a resolution. In 2021, our resolution did not include language to allow the rollover of funds in the 2022 budget year. This allows us to move this pool of funds into that year so we can look towards the end of the year and close that out. So it's more of a housekeeping kind of a function.
Any questions for Mr. Seaver? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Seaver. Next up, if we have a resolution by Rita Curran. Ms. Curran, if you would like to read this, please.
Thank you. I have a resolution condemning the United States Army's guidance, directing our soldiers to apply for SNAP benefits, and calling on the Department of Defense to investigate what is needed for salary increases for our active duty military.
Seconded by Mr. Perkins, Mr. Arquette, Mr. Sheraton, Ms. Curran.
So this was brought to me by some active military people who were concerned that with inflation, it was really hard to feed their families. They were starting to have like group dinners so that everybody could bring something and they could put all of their money together to be able to feed their families. I think that we ask people to go put their lives on the line to keep our country free, and we should make sure that they can feed their families.
Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you bringing this resolution forward. I'd like to act as a sponsor if I could. I want to be on record though as saying that through the resolution, I have no way of criticizing the Army in any way, shape or form, but I think they should prioritize
the annual level of salary to bring them up above the annual salary that would require them to apply for SNAP. So thanks again.
Okay, Mr. Burke.
I agree with what Rita said. And I agree with what Tony said. I guess I'm wondering, the guidance that was given by the Army to apply for SNAP or whatever other assistance might be available. I'm wondering if the Department of the Army is basically trying to meet the needs of their soldiers until raises can be. I don't believe that the Army has the power to enact raises for their soldiers, or they probably would have done it already. So I guess I would fall short of condemning the Army for encouraging their members to seek whatever assistance they can to put food on the table. Certainly wholeheartedly support encouraging the policymakers to give them a living wage. But I think in the meantime, in the interim, I think it's important that whatever assistance they need, they get.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burke. I believe we have Mrs. Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with what most of what's been said. I wish this resolution were two resolutions, okay? I don't want to condemn the Army either. I mean, look what these people have done for us for the last 200 and something years, many years. And as Mr. Burke pointed out, I think they were suggesting a stopgap measure to help these people out. Now, these people live in our county, so they pay taxes in our county and they buy things in our county. They're entitled to these benefits. On the other hand, I love the second part, which is asking for the Department of Defense to take a look at. I thought the one whereas that was very important was an individual working in a minimum wage job of 40 hours a week under the recently raised New York State minimum wage standard would secure an annual salary of over $27,000. Even though that's a hard wage to support a family on. At the same time, these people who have put their lives on the line deserve at least that. Now, I'm sure that, and I don't know this for sure, whether there's something that has to do with whether you're stationed in North Dakota versus New York, if there's any difference in what they're paid. But I wish this were two parts, if you follow me, because condemning the Army, no, they're trying to help people, but they don't, like Mr. Burke said, they don't have control over. Yeah, and take a look at what you need to pay these guys. Look what they're doing for us. Men and women who go out there every day and drag their families around. It's a hard life. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Mr. Forsyth.
I guess like commend Rita for bringing it forward. This is a tough one. I believe Congress is the one that makes the decision of where to spend and appropriate the money for this. And if we don't start it on the local level, maybe they'll never hear us. So at least you got the ball rolling, and hopefully other counties and throughout can jump on board. What I'm seeing in my business of late is people that I never imagined would be coming in needing a copy of their homeowners or auto policy because they're applying for food stamps and SNAP. The elderly are going to get stung this year, drastically. So it's not just the Army, but this is a good step. But there's some serious road ahead, I think, this winter. So thank you.
So just so we're clear,
Ms. Kern.
condemning United States Army guidance, not the United States Army, comma, but the United States Army guidance.
So first, Mr. Denisha.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this forward, Rita, because our men and women in the armed forces shouldn't have to seek out food stamps. for their sustenance. But I guess I'm a little bit concerned with the condemning part as well. So I would like to offer an amendment. And just replace condemning with questioning.
So we have a motion. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Berg and Mrs. Haggard. So we have the amended resolution in front of us now, and it would change, what would your exact words be for Kelly, Mr. Denisha?
The exact words would be questioning the United States Army guidance directing soldiers to apply for SNAP benefits, calling on the Department of Defense to investigate salary increases practice.
So any discussion on the language itself? Mr. Gray? Could you please turn on your mic? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Larry, would you accept a friendly amendment to that, just in which we can just start with calling on the Department of Defense to investigate salary increases for active duty military personnel? I think that, that's the real crux here. That's something that everyone can get behind. And I think it's a lot less confusing to the general public, so that, we as a board are doing what we really intend to do. And that is, we're urging our congressional people as well as the Army to increase the salaries of our active duty personnel. Would you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Yes, I would.
Chair.
So Mrs. Haggard, did you have a comment?
May I comment?
Yes, go ahead, please.
That solves the problem of dividing it in half right there, so I like that.
I'm going to ask the clerk to read this.
Calling on the Department of Defense to investigate Army guidance directing soldiers to apply for SNAP benefits, and calling on the Department to SNAP benefits and to investigate salary increases for active duty military personnel.
Does that reflect your comments, Mr. Reagan?
I thought we were just starting at, we were cutting off the first line and half the second line and just starting at calling on the Department of Defense to investigate salary increases for active duty military personnel.
Okay, so we would be eliminating, this is a friendly amendment, we probably should vote on it.
Yeah.
So let's say, let's go with a second on that. Is there a second?
Okay, just as an observation, and I do apologize for that. If you are modifying the title to reflect that, and now therefore the first provision in the action provisions is resolution. Also, that may be modified.
Okay. So we do have,
I don't, I don't think we have to change the rest of the text. I think the main thrust is the,
okay, so here's what we'll do, because it's significantly different, so it's really not, it is friendly, but it's not really a friendly amendment. So I think what Mr. Denisha would have to withdraw his initial amendment, and then we could go with yours. If you're willing to do that, Mr. Denisha, withdraw your changing the word condemning to questioning, then we could speak to Mr. Reagan's comment about leaving out that whole half of that first sentence.
I would be willing to withdraw.
So who was the second? Was Mr. Burke and Mrs. Haggard, I'm sorry. Will you both withdraw your second?
Yes.
So now we will turn to Mr. Reagan's, and his resolution for the amendment is, would you read it, Kelly, please?
Yes. Calling on the Department of Defense to investigate salary increases for active duty military personnel.
So is there a second to that? So second by Mrs. Haggard. First hand up is actually Ms. Curran.
Can we change one word in that? Instead of investigate, initiate salary increases for active duty military?
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, So that's similar. Everybody looks like they're on board with that. So discussion on the amended resolution. And as our county attorney pointed out, then we will have to make a similar change in the now therefore be resolved that the Board of Legislators condemn the recommendations. So the language would have to indicate that the Board of Legislators call on the Department of Defense to investigate salary increase, initiate salary increases. Okay,
Chairman,
yes,
may I make that?
Yeah. yes,
Probably easier to just strike the first now therefore be it resolved, carry the now therefore be it resolved, the second paragraph, start there. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Legislators calls upon its federal representatives to encourage the Department of Defense.
so you've heard the recommendation from the county attorney. Is there a motion to remove that language that now therefore be resolved? Made by Mr. Denisha, second by Mr. Smithers. All those, any questions on that change? All those in favor of removing that signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So we're back to the amended resolution as made by Mr. Reagan. Is there any comments on that resolution? Okay, so just to clarify, Kelly, if you read it, so here's what we're voting on. If you read that once more for us, please.
Calling on the Department of Defense to initiate salary increases for active duty military personnel.
So that's what we're discussing. Is there any more discussion on this amended resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amended resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, so the next is a resolution by legislator Joe Lightfoot. Mr. Lightfoot, if you would read your resolution, please.
Happy to. Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the county attorney to act of counsel to the plaintiffs in Antoniuk et al. Versus Bruin et al., challenging the Concealed Carry Improvement Act as a violation of the United States Constitution. Move for its adoption.
Second by Mr. Forsythe, Mr. Sheridan, Mr. Denisha, Mr. Smithers, Mr. Arquette, Ms. Curran, Mr. Lightfoot, you were the resolution, Mr. Perkins, and Mr. Reagan. You have a question you're seconding also? Okay. Did I get everybody else? Okay, so Mr. Lightfoot, if you would speak to your resolution, please.
I'd like to. Actually, this dovetails with a resolution that was passed at one of our prior meetings where we took a look at the situation and heard what the opinion of the federal judge was with regards to the merits of the case. And there was a discussion that addresses what is in this resolution to a degree, wherein a majority of the board authorized or stipulated that if the county attorney saw that it would be of use to those that are now challenging this Concealed Carry Improvement Act law, that he would have to return, or we would have to return and vote on an authorization to do so, which this resolution does. It passed by a majority of the board the last time. I see no reason why it wouldn't pass by a majority of the board this time. And I would urge my fellow legislators to vote in favor of it. When a judge, a federal judge particularly, comes out and makes a comment as to his feelings about the constitutionality of something that he has heard chapter and verse about, I think it bodes well for St. Lawrence County and all of the other counties, several of which I have heard put together similar resolutions decrying the mandates of this Concealed Carry Improvement Act. So I urge everyone to support this, and I will certainly be supporting it also.
Okay. Mrs. Haggard.
If I may direct this to the county attorney.
Certainly.
Thank you. Mr. Button, can you explain, I've lost my place now, but you go on to explain, I think it's on the third page, about what of council means, because to me, not an attorney, obviously, that sounds like you're representing those people, and I would think that would be a conflict of some sort. Would you?
It should be more than happy to explain.
Thank
You
you.
would.
That's all. Thank you.
When we were here, if I recall correctly, on September 12th, like the resolution, as I recall it, authorized the county attorney to go and explore what legal options were available. And there were a whole bunch of legal options that were theoretically available. As you recall, I mentioned that there were 7 suits that were currently active associated with challenges to the Concealed Carry Improvement Act. There was a possibility that I could act as direct counsel for some of our department heads. There was a possibility we did piggyback on some type of amicus that was floating out there. There was the possibility that I could act as of counsel. The question is, what does of counsel mean? With respect to of counsel, I am providing consultation and advice to the attorneys that are representing these plaintiffs. I do not represent the plaintiffs. I have not formed an attorney-client relationship with them. I provide guidance to the 2 law firms that are actually representing the plaintiff. So, for example, one firm is out of Mississippi, one firm is out of Virginia. They are not licensed in New York State, but I am familiar with penal law, having been involved in my circuit ruin, having been involved in my circuit versus New York City, and also being a licensed regularly practicing attorney. Questions regarding service due process, effective filing, questions regarding edits on material to make sure that the law is correct. These are all things that they have posed to me. Managing to find the correct folks for the service process, separate and distinct from finding a process server to get them served, are things that they have come to me as service. So when you act as of counsel, you are literally a, for lack of a better term, a legal expert on the of counsel or consultation component to provide them guidance as to how to maneuver these people.
You have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the last time we voted on this, I asked you about the time and the hours. Concerns me because now you're a little deeper into the situation. It's different from the history that we did before.
Not the first one. First one I was up counsel on that.
Okay,
Second one, I was not. Second one, we piggybacked on. If you recall, the of counsel role with respect to my circuit versus New York City, that was about 20 hours on the ground time that was spent engaged. That was plus travel time. And I did a lot of that travel time on my own time. In fact, I did a lot of the work associated with that period on my own. The piggybacking was about 5 hours. The of counsel was about 20 hours plus my travel time. If I had handled a direct litigant, it would have been probably closer to 60 hours per stage. Keep in mind, those 2 prior were at the penultimate. They were at the end. They were at the Supreme Court. So piggybacking on an amicus that's already been filed, we knew it wasn't going to go any further, that they were at the end of the line. The of counsel, we still knew they were at the end of the line. This is actually in the trial level. This is the immediate filing, and this has previously been filed. They got dismissed for a standing issue, which was a technicality. They were looking for guidance from local counsel who could sort of shepherd them through the process of refiling. We refiled last week on Wednesday. An application for a temporary restraining order was filed on Thursday. The court has granted to us an opportunity to be present for an emergency hearing this upcoming Thursday on the temporary restraining order at 11 o'clock in Saturday. So this time, if you were to stretch this all the way to the Supreme Court, which I find it unlikely that would occur, you'd probably be looking at 20 hours, not including travel time. So each state could be cumulatively 60 hours of time. There's 3 stages here, theoretically, plus travel time. Spread out, the average case from start to Supreme Court normally takes about 6 years. Once again, I don't see us. If anything, I would see 2, maybe 3 years of activity And that's a worst case scenario.
Thank you.
Mr. Burke.
I agree with everything Joe said. There needs to be a strong message sent down to the lawmakers in Albany. Supreme Court said they overstepped first time. They came back and even overstepped the second time. Question I have, so to make it clear, I wholeheartedly support this, but I'm wondering, and if I could ask the county attorney, is there any liability on the part of our taxpayers for you providing that service? So that, I mean, those other states that they question whatever guidance you gave them, Steve, and I'm sure it would be spot on, but I'm just thinking of possible ramifications.
If I formed an attorney-client relationship with them, theoretically, there are prohibitions on me forming an attorney-client relationship, correct? Personal litigants. We are prohibited from making gift of taxpayer funds. So providing money directly to the litigants or acting as their direct counsel would be. However, rendering material legal construction and aid in that sense, providing that counsel role, does not run afoul of the gift prohibition that's included in the New York State Constitution. And I never formed an attorney-client relationship. Because of that, the liability is not. I'm not going to tell you someone couldn't sue. People sue for all sorts of crazy stuff all the way around. But do I believe that anyone will be successful? Bring us, we have our involvement.
Thank you.
Mr. Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank Legislator Lightfoot for bringing this forward and County Attorney Steve Button for assisting with this. I heard a very disturbing, I got a very disturbing question yesterday from a constituent, a Vietnam vet. Their review, and I have since seen that this is cropping up all over the state from other veterans groups whose reading of this new concealed carry law seems to indicate that giving a 21-gun salute to one of our deceased veterans at a cemetery would be in violation of this new law. And it just is shocking to me and is a prime example of how this law cannot stand. And, I think our board should and must do everything we can to get this law repealed and to send a message loud and clear across New York State that this kind of overreach is unacceptable. And for our veterans to be afraid of arrest for honoring their comrades is just totally unacceptable. So please vote for this.
Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I get calls constantly from my constituents and many others. What are we doing? Are we doing anything? Well, we need to. We need to protect our constitutional rights at whatever cost it may be, whether it's time or little money, whatever it is. I do appreciate you bringing this forward and the time you're putting on this, Steve. I just see this as another attempt to disarm honest citizens, but continue to release convicted felons to commit more violent crimes against people, and that's what's happening all across the state. Look at New York City right now, same things happen. I urge everybody to vote for this, and I'd love to.
Okay, Mrs. Haggard spoke. Anyone else before Mrs. Haggard, second time? Ms. Curran.
I would like to be added as a co-sponsor as well. Please.
Mr. Denisha,
Mr. Chairman, I would like to be added as co-sponsor.
Sheridan,
Same here.
Mr. Fay also, Mr. Arquette. Okay, so Mr. Smithers. So we'll go for the second round of comments. We'll start out with Mrs. Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'd like permission to address the
Sure.
county attorney.
Yep.
I'd like to also point out that I support every amendment, all 27 of them. Mr. Button,
Yes, ma'am.
could you tell me what part of this law, because I don't know, has to do with what Mr. Reagan?
Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
actually very familiar with it.
Okay, tell me.
So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Concealed Carry Improvement Act, it was actually a number of different various provisions that were meant to address the NYSERDA versus Bruin decision, which ultimately found that proper cause did not exist. The suit that we are going to be rendering guidance on actually challenges a whole host of them, at the core of it. At its core, there are certain requirements regarding the application process. When an individual applies for a gun permit, they actually now provide up to 3 years of social media so that they can be investigated. That is something that Judge Sutterby indicated was a violation of the First Amendment, because it may actually, and Fifth Amendment through the 14th Amendment, may violate both your ability to express yourself, but also may violate your ability to avoid self-incrimination. So we are challenging that component. There is a component associated with the now good moral character clause. Originally, you had to have proper cause to have one issue. Instead of proper cause, when the state legislature came back 8 days later, they replaced those terms and they slid in, you must demonstrate good moral character. We're challenging that because, once again, it is the exact type of amorphous language that could be very easily manipulated discretionarily by the licensing officer. What is good moral character to one may not be good moral character to another. The main thrust, though, of the Concealed Carry Improvement Act included a new designation of sensitive places, places in which weapons could no longer be brought. The sensitive place designation includes more than 20 locations, some of which were very broad. Locations in which people tend to gather was identified as a sensitive place. Government buildings, which is not abnormal. We've had restrictions historically on access to governmental buildings with a firearm, but all of a sudden you could no longer take a firearm into an entire segment of New York City. Not take a firearm into any park. Park is a very broad term. Are they referring to a child's park? Well, they have a different segment that says you can't attend any location in which children can use a firearm. So if you read park in its broadest sense, that would also probably include the Adirondack Park. Separately, they identified gatherings as a location for the expression of political speech. You cannot take a firearm to a gathering for an expression of political speech. What if the gathering for the political speech is in fact to gather to demonstrate support for the Second Amendment? You cannot bring a gun to a Second Amendment gathering expressing the right to support that Second Amendment. They barred that. Well, included in those sensitive place designations is language that would seemingly include cemetery. If you cannot have a 21 gun salute at a location in which there is A, a gathering, B, an identified public park, if it's a municipal cemetery, that's governmental land also, then you are in fact barred from exercising that discharge of the firearm in those areas. In fact, you can't even carry it on there. I know at the last meeting, you all discussed the fact that there were restrictions associated with the reenactments. The reenactments. Those reenactments frequent public locations. They also happen to be historical reenactments, which are quasi-museums. Quasi-museums fall into the sensitive place designation. That was at the core. Then they put a catch-all phrase in there, and they said, well, with respect to private locations, your private businesses, your private residents, you are permitted to place a placard designating that your location is open to guns being brought on. Otherwise, it is presumed that it is banned, which was far more expansive than anything that NYSERDA versus Bruin ever anticipated. And they went through a fairly lengthy explanation of why those types of restrictions were not acceptable for the New York State Legislature to 8 days later pass a law that specifically flouted the direct language of the United States Supreme Court decision is, from a legal standpoint, incredibly stunning. But I digress. Mr. Reagan is referring to the sensitive place doctrine that's included in the state legislation that would bar the carrying of a firearm in those locations for the discharge during the 21 months.
Oh, so I read that list because I'm quite fun. Like this stuff. Are you extrapolating or does it include cemetery?
It does not expressly designate cemetery, just like the word park doesn't expressly designate the Adirondack Park.
Okay.
But the difficulty is because the language was so broad, it would naturally incorporate in areas in which people frequent cemeteries.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Denisha.
One last bite of the apple. This, I said it last time we talked about this, and I'll say it again. This is just another raft of laws that are not going to change the behavior or actions of criminals. The only people that these laws are going to impact are law-abiding citizens. It's going to make it more difficult for them. I don't know why criminals don't abide by the laws that are already enacted. Why would anyone think that additional laws was going to make them act?
Anyone else? I want to thank Mr. Lightfoot for bringing this up. I mean, we've been caught up in the minutia of where these demonstrations can take place, where you can carry, but really what it is a blatant attempt to by the leadership here in New York State to take away our Second Amendment rights. It's just what it is, to restrict them. And actually the ones that are most affected by it are actually the minorities that live in these environments where their lives are in danger every day. If you look at the two Supreme Court cases, the McDonald and the Heller case, both those were Black plaintiffs that wanted to have guns to protect themselves from crime in there where they were living. It's just a blatant attempt. We're getting caught up in these details. What's a park? What's the area that's protected and all this? This is all it is we want to take away your Second Amendment rights. We really want to take away all your guns. And that's all it is. It's just plain and simple. So let's, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have Mrs. Haggard is the opposed.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the Vacancy Review Committee. We have Bruce Doyle, our county administrator.
We have one remaining vacancy that was considered by the committee earlier this month, and it is for the treasurer. Okay. Okay, so the position that we are requesting to fill is for the chief payroll clerk in my office. Some history on this. In January, the board approved an additional position in my office. We created a payroll clerk position that is a grade underneath this. That was in order to address the desperate need for coverage and backup and the amount, some of it's sheer volume, but also to allow us to tackle some things that we could not get to with the tackle that we had previously. So in May, we hired someone on a temp position in this role of chief payroll clerk as a temp position, and this resolution is to move her to a permanent appointment.
Any questions for the treasurer? I believe so.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up, we have a report from Ruth Doyle on the American Rescue Plan Act funds.
Few items to share with you this month. Want to let you know that Cornell Cooperative Extension has been paid out the 90% of the funds appropriated to them. With all of the contracts for services provided, the way that we've gone about making these appropriations out to the organizations is we're providing the 90% to them to complete their project. And then when they give us the final closeout, whether that's invoices or any of the items we need for reporting, we're closing that out with that remaining 10%. And so we have made that appropriation. One of the things that I wanted to bring up with regard to our sharing of information relative to, I think that you may have noticed I've made good habit every finance committee of giving you an update of where we are. So that brings our current total spend to 90,000. With the other appropriations available to those entities when they close out. But we will very soon be moving on the Clifton Pine Hospital. We'll be moving on making those appropriations for the best purchase and many others that the board's appropriated to for the American Rescue Plan. The IDA is very close to announcing some of their recipients of their application process associated with small businesses. So those will be coming through very shortly. But one of the things that I noticed when we were in NISAC this last week was a discussion from one of our neighboring counties a little further away in Oswego. And they've actually taken a web page to share all of the information relative to the ARPA funds. So there's a one-stop shop where all that information, I know the IDA has created a great page for the work that they're doing that can be connected to it, but I think it would give the public in St. Lawrence County a great one-stop information piece. Not everyone, I know it's incredible, but not everyone watches the finance committee meeting. And so they might miss the updates. So in that way, they could log on anytime and get the information and bring questions to any of you as we move forward through the next really 4 years of these funds moving through and being appropriated. So I want to give you that heads up. That's something I'm interested in doing. And the applications, as a reminder, there's a banner at the top of our webpage where the utility applications are available. And I believe that's open through November. So make sure to share that information out as well. Are there any questions on American Rescue Plan funds at this time? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, next up is the county administrator's report, and if it's okay with the body, I'm going to put it through the resolutions first. All right.
So I'll read. So the resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for property maintenance needs and energy costs. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Burke.
So I don't think anyone is unaware of what's happening with energy these days. And in St. Lawrence County, we have seen 125% increase in electricity, 114% increase in natural gas costs. So we also recognize that the sales tax that's paid along with those costs is a revenue that we can recognize to help offset and maintain our appropriations as we continue forward into 2022, not certain where those will top out. So this resolution makes an effort both to address that issue and move some money around, as well as transfer some funds associated with some work that will be done in social services. Our new deputy commissioner started with us. We have moved some staff out to human services. That will also allow us to do some minor renovations and get the setup ready for his tenure with us.
Okay, any questions for Mrs. Doyle on this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. The next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign contracts for exterior maintenance and updates at the county courthouse complex and modifying the 2022 budget to open a capital project in the county administrator's office. Moved by Mr. Denisha, second by Ms. Curran.
So this resolution does a couple of things. Our buildings and grounds supervisor undertook a project on the newer 1993 courthouse. So that's not on this end of the building. It's over where the courts are located. That building was completed in 1993 and is in great need of some attention. We certainly are aware that there are some challenges we face with the windows in that area. That's a separate project. This project attempts to do a couple of things. We need to deal with the stonework in that area. We also, for those of you who may remember years back, the paint on that side of the building has faded with weather and years. We'd like to renew that in those large circles that are on the front facade of the courthouse side there. We also would like some repair done to the stonework to ensure both that it's watertight and prepared for the weather coming up in the winter. And then we'd also like to do some surveying drone work. I believe we talked about actually in our Buildings and Grounds Committee about having the roof areas surveyed and some photographs taken so that we can assess the impact of weather on the roof. This building is certainly in need of attention as well as many others. We've competitively bid all these projects. The numbers are in front of you. This would allow us to get the work done also, not only on the building itself, but on the sidewalk. Many of you have either mentioned or noticed the sidewalk area needs just to be leveled again. And that planter area also has some cracks in it and isn't stable at this time. So we'd like to get that addressed as well with this resolution. I think going forward, we're also talking about some work in the county clerk's office. Opening a capital project for this complex allows us to isolate any and all costs that we spend associated with the work in this building.
Have any questions for Mrs. Doyle? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a maintenance agreement for the monochrome digital press in central printing and mail and modifying the 2022 budget for the county administrator's office. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Burke.
So we have a request here for $48,000 to replace the large digital press that, among other things, prints our tax bills every year. We looked at a couple of options between leasing, which some of our equipment over the years we have leased, and compared that to the purchase price as well as a maintenance agreement. Over the last 3 years, we have set aside some funds in contingency to a total of $90,000. We have, as you may recall, purchased a folder inserter and another printer. Those came to approximately $53,000. So we're looking to have this purchase made this year. And I believe that with this purchase, we'll have all the equipment caught up, which functions as a countywide print shop.
Okay, questions for Mrs. Doyle? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next resolution is authorizing the contractor JP Morgan Chase Bank N.A. to participate in the New York State Purchasing Card P-Card program. Moved by Mr. Burke, second by Mr. Lecter.
So this resolution is in effect one of those areas where when the board and previous budgets have needed more revenue, this has been a place where we've been able to find it. This is rebates associated with purchases made on the county's credit card, if you will. We have, I believe, every year since NYSAC introduced this program, been the top earning rebate county. And this year was no different with $123,000 awarded to us last week. This has been tremendously successful. It has created an opportunity for everything from our community college payments to highway materials, large items that have really improved the revenue associated with this rebate. So at this point, we've taken a look at a better rate associated with JP Morgan than BMO can offer. It has a higher interest rate at 2.19 over the purchase collectively, where I believe the BMO price was 1.3. So this is an advantage to us. Certainly, we had the opportunity both to talk with the folks at BMO and NYSAC, as well as the new folks at JP Morgan. They're looking forward to working with us.
Okay, Mrs. Hackett has a question, comment.
Very quickly, congratulations on the big giant check.
Thank you.
Can you give us an idea of what the dollar difference would be between going to JP and purchase, whichever?
It will depend on the overall purchases, but I can share that with you. I can give you an average.
Okay.
We'll be looking at with the same purchases.
Thank you.
You bet.
Anyone else? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Schindler Elevator Corporation for elevator maintenance in county facilities. Moved by Mrs. Hager, second by Mr. Smithers. And Ms. Burke.
Our superintendent, Jim Traffin of Buildings and Grounds, is with us this evening for a little bit of discussion on our elevators in our contract.
Hello, yes, I'd like to put forth a resolution to enter into a new contract service agreement to my elevator. We have 8 elevators in our buildings. They will do regular maintenance. We did entertain other bids and Schindler came in the lowest. 10, 15 years now, very familiar with our elevators and our issues.
Any questions for Mr. Traffin? Mr. Denisha? Sure.
Jim, the elevators, the 8 elevators we have, are they Schindler, are they all Schindler elevators?
No, we have 2 Schindlers, 2 Otis. I can't think of that one.
Guess, yeah, my question is if I were going to someone that Otis elevators, but it was good service.
I can speak to one area that's been a concern prior to Jim's arrival, and probably a little bit since he's been here, is getting technicians in this area. Some start out in Syracuse, I believe, is what we've been dealing with, and then they'll have someone who left, they don't have a replacement, and so in the end, we end up waiting for someone who can come up and give attention to our facilities. That's been a challenge.
Okay. So this is the first time Mr. Trappin has appeared before us. Welcome. Thank you. Everyone gets to ask one personal question.
No. Moving on. Figured you were both.
So, welcome, yeah. All right. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Right.
Opposed? Yeah. All right, so we'll move on to committee reports. I've asked to change up. Oh, sorry. Oh, you're not done. Okay. You had something else.
Just a couple things.
You're not on the agenda. My list.
Yeah, I wanted to do the resolution first, remember? Okay, so just a few items to give you an update. Wanted to thank you for allowing me to attend NISAC. Once again this year, there were 5 representatives. Our chairman was able to attend, Legislator Haggard, our treasurer, Renee Cole, our public health director for the first time, Jolene Munger, was able to attend, as well as myself. I'm still the chair of the NISAC Taxation and Finance Committee. Our treasurer is now a member of that committee also. I also participate for the 2nd year on the Resolutions Committee. So that's very helpful when we bring these items back and these subject matter that are much ingrained into our legislative agenda, along with many actions of this board. But it's a good attachment to find out what NISAC is working on and how we help move that forward. Similar to the spring conference, I'll share all of the adopted resolutions with the board. And if there are any that you see you'd like to see on a future agenda in October, I'm happy to make sure we tweak that for St. Lawrence County's interest and pull the data with that and bring that to the appropriate agenda in the committee meetings coming up. That also will help us get ready, if we're able to pass those now, for the 2023 legislative session at the state level, as well as for the new term of the board coming in 23, help to frame the legislative agenda for St. Lawrence County. Wanted just to remind you or mention to you a couple of events that will be coming up. October is, if you may recall, the St. Lawrence County Designated History Month. So we will be bringing you a resolution to the October board meeting, making that declaration. But also wanted to announce you have a flyer on all of your desks that we will have in celebration of our St. Lawrence County History Month. Jody Hadlock, who will be here on October 6th, you're all invited to the Fairfield Inn for the Lives of Diamond Bessie to do both. All the historians are invited, as well as the legislators to attend. There'll be light refreshments, and our own historian, Nancy LaFavor, is helping sponsor. So wanted to make sure you're aware of that if you'd like to attend. Also, there is one of the Ready events coming up on Wednesday, September 28th at 1 o'clock at the Island View Pavilion in Waddington. You're all invited to join that ceremony for the groundbreaking for the $11 million wastewater treatment plant that Waddington will be endeavoring to address. So let me know if you can attend. We'll make sure that we pass that along to the DEC staff. Also, which I mentioned at one of our last meetings, the annual tourism dinner for the St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce is coming up. If you are interested, please let us know. It's Wednesday, October 19th, starting at 5:30, and that is at the stables at Windy Point. So if you can, please let us know just as soon as possible. And then the last one I wanted to share with you with regard to Renewal House. As we celebrate in October Domestic Violence Awareness Month, 40 years of their operation on Wednesday, October 12th. That begins at 5:30. And our retired probation director, Francine Peretta, will be speaking, as well as the retired family court judge, Barbara Cotter. That is at the Grandview. So I have information. I believe Rebecca sent that out to all of you as well. If you'd like to attend, certainly let us know. Wanted just to spend a few minutes on the budget plan moving forward. We have been working, but as the resolutions you've just taken action on tonight, there are many volatile numbers yet in the budget relative to the cost of things, as well as the revenues that we can anticipate. So I've talked with the chair of finance, as well as with Chairman Sheridan. I will plan to present the 2023 budget at the finance committee next month. There are two options, as you may recall, for budget reviews. We can use the practice that we have undertaken for the last 7 years with the jurisdictional committees being the location for departments to report. So at operations, all of the departments that report to operations would be present or online at that time and be able to respond to any questions you might have, similar services and finance. Or we also have the option to have all of the departments attend and review with you the way it had been done in prior years. So that, please think that over. The night that I present the budget at finance, we can make that determination and move forward. I did want to report out to you the New York State fiscal distress scores for St. Lawrence County. For the very first time, the fiscal score for St. Lawrence County is 0. And if you recall, a number of years ago, we were in the significant fiscal stress category. We have moved down from a score in 2021 of 12.9, but our score was as high as 46.3. So we're very, very excited about the progress made on that front. So if you remember, they do 2 scores. They do the fiscal stress and then they do the environmental impacts. Our highest score in that area was 36.7, and it is down to 12.9. I apologize, 16.7. 12.9 was fiscal score last year. So we're quite pleased also with that. In the environmental range, that begins a designation at 29. So we still have quite a bit of room before there is any susceptible environmental stress identified for St. Lawrence County. And just to compare that to the fiscal side, the designation changes at 44.9 to susceptible to fiscal stress.
Can you send that to all of us?
I will. And then lastly, there are 3 devices in my office across the table for you to take a look at on your way out. We'll have those available to you both tonight and next week to take a look at for next year. We're looking at replacing the iPad technology with a couple of other options. So please feel free to stop in. We have them activated. You can take a look at how they function. And then also on the table in my office are the drawings for the roof we received for the old correctional facility, so that can go out for bid. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to committee reports. I've asked for a change of order, strategy wise, I guess, right? So first up, Cornell Cooperative Extension, Mr. Denisha.
Mr. Chairman, we actually have our first meeting that we've had in 2 months, tomorrow evening. And 6 p.m. and will be our annual, just to note, the annual meeting of Cornell Cooperative Extension is Tuesday, October 18th.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Denisha. Next up is Fish and Wildlife Management Board, Ms. Curran.
So September had a very long meeting. I'm gonna actually send everybody a copy of the meeting minutes because you don't want to be here long enough for whatever they did. And then we can put something online with like the bullet points. But a lot of things have changed. Since we should be able to have those meeting minutes out by the end.
Thank you, Ms. Curran. Fisheries Advisory Board, Ms. Terminelli.
We meet in the basement tomorrow night at 7.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Terminelli. Governor Fair Board, Mr. Smithers.
At our last meeting, we got a financial report on the fair, and was reported that the income is determined, but the expenses are pretty well paid, but there's still some to be paid. They're meeting again next Tuesday week from tomorrow, and I can give you a preliminary report. Fair income is $203,606, and expenses as of that date were $212,548. There was loss in the main concert, Sawyer Brown, of over 20,000. Fireman's Parade doesn't have any income, but they give out prizes, so that's an expense. Harness races had an overall profit of a little over 4,000. Tractor pull that had some abnormality where that was canceled, so that was a disappointing loss. Demolition Derby is very successful, and they have quite a significant profit there of 18,000. So I don't have any financial report on the Pumpkin Festival, which was held yesterday, so that usually make a little money there. And to be determined is money that's usually made, which helps to offset some of the losses from the fair for storage, which is just starting to take place for this season.
There's a nice feature today of the news at noon on the Pumpkin Festival and so showing off actually the 4-H building where the ARPA monies were used to refurbish it. That was today at noon.
There's quite a lot of positive comments on the improvements that were made using the ARPA funds. And there was quite a lot of noticeable improvement on the looks. Some new paint here and there, quite a lot of cleanup work, some new electrical work had been done. So overall, the condition of the fair, I've heard quite a lot of positive comments about the appearance.
Great. So next up is Highway and Solid Waste. That's you again, Mr. Smithers.
Okay, and I have nothing further to report beyond what was presented by our chair, Don Peters.
Recreational Trails and Advisory Board, Mr. Arquette.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The multi-use summer season ended on September 15th. There was a total of 1,783 trail passes sold, which is a little over 500 more than last season. Right now, in this year compared to last year, we have 4 clubs. Last year we had 2. So some of that money got passed on to the clubs, which the 4 clubs, along with the county advisory board, are all doing work bees right now to get the trails ready for the winter season and grooming. We've sit in this room over the years many times talking about fire departments and how, fire departments are hurting for money and help and everything. And I just wanted to point out real quick that the multi-use trail had over 14 events this year, a number of different causes. But, just for example, in May, the Tri-Town Trail Riders donated $2,000 to the Helena Fire Department. That same day, the Dustin Berger Memorial Run donated $4,200 to the SLC Chemical Dependency Program. There was the Kermit Blanchard Memorial Run, the Sammy Curtis ATV Run, had 220 machines donate $7,200 to the Lodge Dreaming Tree Ranch. The Helena Volunteer and Rescue 3rd Annual Ride for the Fight, another fire donation. There was a Bowden Run, a Memory Run. The Hopkins Fort Jackson Fire Department ATV Run had donated $1,100 to the Fort Jackson Fire Department. The Norwood Fire Department has had a couple of different runs and donated significant amount of money. And again, what a cause for our fire and rescue. And just keep in mind, not only have these individuals bought the trail passes to the degree of $1,783 and $92,000 generated, that they've spent money donating to these fire departments, to these memorial causes, and is equally important to all the businesses around our county. So that's just an example of how the trail system is an integral part of our economic development here in the county. And that's my report.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Arquette, do the fire departments have equipment that are along these trails or in those vicinities that they can actually, if there is ever was an accident, that they can be rescued? Do they have ATVs or UTVs with backboards? Are they all fully equipped that they can rescue somebody?
I can't speak for all of them, but I know that several of them, including the one right across from me, are well equipped and they're out there in an instant when they're called upon. Thankfully, I don't see them heading out to do that often, which is a good thing, but they are ready and prepared to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the RVRDA, Mr. Forsyth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim caught me a little off guard here. I usually follow in his footsteps and I really don't get much to talk about, but it was a good RVRDA meeting the other day. Actually, good news for the area and some bad news. Andy McMahon made a presentation guess, electric costs are supposed to rise significant in the short time. And he said significant, which is kind of a detriment, but, we passed our budget for 2023, not much changes to that. The financials are good for the RVRDA. We did make 2 loans. One is for the former ACO building. I don't know if you know where it is. It's on 37 across from the old jail and next to Riverview. It's just shy of 400,000 square feet. And last year there was some concern. It went up for sale for about $7 million, and everyone says ACO's leaving, and here we go. What are we going to do with this building? Well, a developer from Watertown, Jake Johnson and Alex Morgia, teamed up with another guy known as Mark Hebert, who does musical equipment distributor from Toronto. They're buying the building. We RVRDA, I think our loan was 130 along in conjunction with the IDA. The music equipment distributor is going to bring 13 jobs to the ACO plant. ACO will use a much smaller footprint, and then he eventually believes he can bring up other Canadian businesses into that facility too. So that's good news. It stays on the tax rolls. It's nice to see the Watertown guys starting to come to this, coming up our way. So that was the good news. Nexus, they're in the Bridge and Port Authority presently. They've been there for a few years. A couple years ago, they were trying to buy the Newell building. Newell building, Rubbermaid, dormant or vacant for, I want to say almost 20 years, but basically been off the tax rolls. The idea put a substantial amount of time and money, I believe over $2 million. I'll let Jim go beyond, to renovate that building. And 2 or 3 years ago, it was close to Connexus swinging over there, but there were some environmental issues which they've addressed, cleaned up, gotten taken care of. So now they're going to take occupancy of the Newell building, which, like I said, it's a big old building that sat there, not doing much for Ogdenford for years. I forget the number of jobs. I'll let Jim. Let's say they got 13 existing, or a little bit more. 15.
Around there.
Yeah, with potential for growth, and they're only going to take a footprint of, I think, 35,000 square feet for now, with the plans to expand it. So it's good news. Now they'll be paying a tax program of some sort based on their square footage. So the county, the city, everyone will be a recipient of it, which they haven't been in a long time. So it's good news for Ogdenford and St. Lawrence County. And that ACO building at 400,000, I think it's one of the largest distribution places north of the Thruway. Yeah, it's substantial. It's huge. So I think that's it. But yeah,
You said the company was Nexus, is that the solar?
Connexus.
Oh, Connexus, okay.
Yeah.
What did they actually do, Mr. Forsyth?
I'm gonna leave it at the Jim, because I met with him. I met with him 3 years ago. He came in my office to talk about some other stuff, and
Well, we'll segue into the idea.
Jim, I can't. Thank you, but there has been a loan outstanding with the RVRDA that's been great payment throughout the history. Good business.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. Mr. Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add to what Dave said, typically I take all the wind out of Dave's sails. So I thought today, give him a chance to announce some terrific news for Ogdensburg and St. Lawrence County. Connexus is a company, it's an Ottawa-owned company that wants to expand its operations here in the US. Currently, they have been producing copper-based technology, and they want to shift their operation into fiber optics and put themselves on a high-tech growth pattern for success here in the US. This, is going to allow them to not just expand their footprint, but to add a lot of new equipment, bring in a lot of new technical jobs into Ogdensburg, higher paying jobs, and grow the business. Here we have what was a derelict 90,000 square foot building in the heart of Ogdensburg, overlooking the waterfront. The roof was beginning to fall in. The vandals had broken in. They created a skateboard park inside. It was, very likely that it was going to turn into another huge mess. It was off the tax rolls. The county was receiving no taxes. The city was receiving no taxes. The school district was receiving no taxes. Under this plan, the first year they'll only take 8,000 square feet. In the following year, they've got a first option to acquire another 37,000 square feet. And depending on how their expansion plans into the US go, they're looking at the rest. The IDA intends to work with others if they don't. But the goal is to rent out the entire building, possibly sell the entire building, and get the entire building back on the tax rolls, paying property taxes to the county, the city, the school district. So it's a major win for our community to save this historic building from falling down and get it back into productive uses, bring in, allow a local company to expand and hire more people. Two other things that I think are important. The IDA made a small loan to M&M Heating and Plumbing, which is a Governor company, to help them sell the business to one of the employees to keep the company in operation in Governor. The IDA's micro enterprise loan will help make that possible. Most of the loan is from community bank and owner equity and other sources, but the IDA wanted to help make that possible for that transition from the current owner, to one of the employees. The other piece of good news is the ARPA award summary. They announced initial grants from the Small Business and Nonprofit Assistance Program that this board authorized. Those initial $2,500 grants will be going to the Helena General Store in Brazier, Chalette's Redemption Center in Canton, the Route 68 Deli in Oswegatchie, Garden Share in Canton. The Facility and Infrastructure Improvements Fund will award $5,000 to Main Street Perk under the name TBB River Road LLC in Waddington. And the Workforce Training Development, up to $7,500 per worker, going to the St. Lawrence County ARC to help them with place a existing worker, and Adirondack Fragrance and Flavor Farm in Parishville, so they can hire a new worker. That's $5,000 that they'll be using to, help defray the cost of training and getting that person productive. And $40,000 is going to go to the Cranberry Lake Mountaineers Snowmobile Association in Cranberry Lake to help them buy a new groomer. This groomer is particularly vital because it will, it's not as wide as the other groomers that are used, and it will allow them to operate in a part of the Adirondack Park to meet the regulations and allow them to connect with the Lewis County trail system. And our goal all along has been to, Lewis County has one of the most active trail systems in New York State that every year brings in untold numbers of tourists to Lewis County by getting that trail connection open into Lewis County. We become much more of a major tourism destination for the entire Northeast because it allows snowmobilers to go down to Lewis County, where they have a huge infrastructure with rentals and service business and everything else, and come on up here and see St. Lawrence County and see the wonderful trail system that we've developed. So the IDA's efforts to help expand tourism, travel, and hospitality capacity building is off to a good start. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, that's all we have time for. So,
Oh, I see how it is.
St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce, Mrs. Haggard,
Okay,
please.
far be it from me to hold up a Cowboys game. I had a baby on Super Bowl when the Cowboys were playing, and I was told to hurry up.
It's just like, really a lot of
A
information.
lot of
That's what
information. I know better than to hold up a Cowboys game. Okay, piggybacking off what legislator Reagan said, the ARPA travel, tourism, and hospitality promotion and capacity programs from the chamber, they're having a media mixer on Wednesday, September 28th from 8:30 to 10. This is to advertise and bring to the media the information about applying for these grants. The application deadline has been set for October 17th, and they've said that if the funds remain after this round, there will be an ongoing application process. To find out more about that, www.slcchamber.org. The old River Fest, where I had an opportunity to chat with legislator Reagan, was held at the waterfront from the 8th to the 11th, and it was a joint effort between the county chamber and the wonderful people at the Augsburg Chamber. So impressive, plus the city of Augsburg. The festival featured tours of the tall ship, which we got to do. Highlights, they had over 600 school kids come. The Remington Museum, if you bought a boarding pass to get on the ship, you got a free entrance to the Remington Museum. They set a one-day record on attendance that day, which was great. And over 3,000 people attended. It was really impressive. They're going to try to do this every 3 years in coordination with the Tall Ship Challenge in the Great Lakes, because these guys had sailed that boat down from the Great Lakes. Okay, the submission of fall foliage reports to I Love New York are ongoing. Fall blogs to visit stlawrencecounty.com. The fall bucket list and Halloween events, a streaming TV advertisement in partnership with the Thousand Island Seaway region promoting fall history and recreation in the county. Snowmobile advertising. Bassmasters Open in Waddington, July 20th through the 22nd, 2023. Full page ads will be placed in the fishing regulation guides throughout the Northeast. And also they'll be communicating about summer 2023 major events. I had an opportunity, and I'm sure some of you may have gone to the excellent craft food and wine open air market at the St. Lawrence Power and Equipment Museum out in Madrid this past Saturday. They had over 1,800 visitors and 60 artisans. It was a gorgeous day too. As Mrs. Doyle pointed out, the St. Lawrence County annual dinner is coming up on October 19th. I plan to go. Don't keep that from you coming, Mr. Akers. But that would be great.
It's a big
And-
place.
Oh, okay. The Craft Food and Wine Holiday Show will be held at the SUNY Potsdam Maxey Hall on December 3rd. And there's a couple other things. Our next meeting is October 13th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Zager. Next up, soil and water, Mr. Burke.
The state representative, Brian Cunningham, provided the required district training to board members at the last meeting. County forester and district manager are working to create template bid packets, contracts, and other documents that will be needed to carry out the removal of hazardous trees and utilizing the ARPA funds. Snowmobile grant, trail grant was submitted by the deadline. County forester has been continuing his work on updating the forest inventory and writing the county forest management plan. The technician, Giovanna Foster, has been, she did some work on Black Lake inventorying weed population there, and we lost the drone. They lost connection and couldn't find the drone, so the board authorized purchase of a new drone. I guess there's hazards in every job, right? And that's about it.
It's a very thorough report. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to old and new business. So we'll go to the resolution first, and that is adopting proposed local law C for the year 2022, which states authorizing the use of video or similar service for remote attendance of meetings of public bodies acting in the name of St. Lawrence County pursuant to Chapter 1 of the laws of 2022 for the state of New York. Moved by Mr. Denisa, second by Mr. Perkins. Who do I turn this to you, Ruth, or to our county attorney, or do you like to address this, Mr. Button?
Are you referring to the remote meeting local law? This resolution, like, the board has already seen this resolution once before establishing this local law. This local law really just augments the new provisions of General Municipal Law, Section 103. If you recall, during the course of COVID, you had a fair amount of flexibility associated with remote attendance. When the COVID emergency declaration was permitted to expire, that flexibility left. Just prior to the expiration of that emergency declaration by the state legislature modified General Municipal Law 103. In addition to our traditional ways of remote attendance, call prior to COVID, if you were to appear from another location, you had to notice that location and make it available to the general public, which is still a possibility. If you were going to utilize a new form of General Municipal Law 103, it required the individual county legislature or town board or village trustees to adopt this sort of local setup. What this local law will permit is for this body, as well as any of the advisory council or boards underneath you, to have a certain number of members appear remotely if they can demonstrate that there are extraordinary circumstances requiring that. That extraordinary circumstances does not require them to open up their remote location to public attendance or provide for notice of that location. There is a caveat with respect to this. If you do have a body that is going to gather, you must have a quorum of the body physically present at the notice location. Separately, there are no policies or procedures with respect to monitoring for a board such as yourself. So even after passage of the local law, they do recommend that the bodies adopt a policy or a procedure for monitoring when the advisory councils and boards that answer to you actually invoke the privileges of General Municipal Law, Section 103.
Any questions for Mr. Button? Mr. Forsyth?
Is there any issue with voting remotely?
No, assuming the protocol is followed correctly, there is no problem with voting remote. So for a hypothetical, let's say Legislator Reagan had an illness that popped up in his house. He was unable to leave his house, but could attend the meeting remotely. He could identify under the correct protocol and procedure to the chair of that meeting that an extraordinary circumstance had arisen, that he wished to attend remotely. He would be able to participate as a part of that with his votes recorded during the entirety of the meeting in which he appeared remotely.
Just follow up. Video, is video required or?
Video under this circumstance is not required under the modified law. However, the Committee on Open Government does strongly recommend that it be included in its practice.
Any questions concerning this resolution or for Mr. Button? Mr. Smithers?
Now, in the resolution's title, it says for remote attendance, and you described that as the purpose of, one of the purposes of this. Reading through it in section 1, purpose, section 2, the recording and broadcasting, and 3 is rules, and 4 is public notice, but I don't see anything specifically saying that it allows for remote attendance. So is that just implied?
No, actually, I apologize for interrupting and cutting you off before you completed your sentence. It's a good observation. The problem is that it's actually augmenting a state statute, and the language is within the state statute, so they are coupled together. This cannot be read individually, stating on its own merit. It has to be actually read in a conjoined fashion with that state statute. But once again, I would strongly recommend that even upon the passage of this local law, if the board decides to pass it, that an adopted policy and procedure come back before the board to establish the remote guidelines for notification of board office as well as you all. I can imagine scenarios in the future where this board will probably find it very instructive, very educational if they discovered that you had 1 or 2 of your appointees that were routinely not making their meetings. And that might educate you as to whether or not future appointees.
Sounds like a committee needs to be formed.
Not necessarily.
To help draft this. Okay, any other questions concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Buck. Any old business? Oh, she has a question. Okay, go ahead.
Legislator Packard, to your earlier question with regard to the increase of rebate. So for example, if we spent the total spend, we have rebates of 111,877. With our new contract, that same spend would be $188,470.
Excellent.
So we're looking forward to that.
Thank you. for recommending.
Check later.
If I can hide it.
Yeah.
Any new business? Do we have a need for an executive session?
We do for
For what purposes?
for personnel, which includes, one moment, please. I know you're surprised I don't have this memorized. But
You gotta make a song, you gotta make it jingle. Yes.
the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation, and appointments.
Personnel and appointments moved by Mr. Forsythe to go into executive. Motion to adjourn made by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Reagan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.